And then Joni told me I was fired July 11th, and Becca JW called us and they were telling us to come back, just read the card, do whatever it takes to come back. And at that point, we knew we had to take our stance, and we knew this is our fight. We have to do what God tells us to do. They made their choice that night. They were like, okay, we're going to do this. They made their choice and we made ours. And from there, the relationship started to dwindle. With Becca JW, it's not, don't want to talk. It's a very conscious choice they've made. I would like for them to speak. The justice for our little child will come from God regardless. And that is my security and my stronghold. Hello, faithful brothers and sisters in the Lord. In today's video, Jonathan Lamb reveals a crucial letter from Jonathan Weiss, husband of Joni Lamb's daughter, Rebecca, highlighting troubling behaviors of Pete towards baby Lamb. Susie and Jonathan Lamb recently sat down for a live TV interview with Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson. During that interview, Jonathan opened up about a powerful letter he had received. The letter came from JW, who is married to Rebecca Lamb Weiss, Joni Lamb's youngest daughter. Now, this wasn't just some basic note or casual message. And JW had taken the time to write out a long, detailed account that revealed something deeply disturbing. According to Jonathan, JW's letter exposed serious concerns about someone named Pete. But this wasn't just a vague warning or a general suspicion. JW went into specific detail about what he had seen, things that involved Pete and Jonathan and Susie's own 5-year-old daughter at the time. Jonathan explained that the letter wasn't written with guesswork or hearsay. It was carefully put together, with each sentence describing what JW had personally witnessed. He had observed Pete's behavior closely, how he acted, how he interacted with their little girl, and the things he wrote down made it clear that something was seriously wrong. These weren't the kind of actions that could be brushed off or misunderstood. What JW described was incredibly upsetting and very specific. It was the kind of letter that makes your heart sink, because this wasn't just someone sharing their opinion. It was someone putting together a timeline, evidence, and personal experiences to show a clear and painful truth. Pete had crossed a line, and not just any line, but one that no adult should ever cross, especially with a child. Jonathan said that when he read the letter for the first time, he couldn't ignore what it revealed. Every observation JW had written pointed to Pete's guilt. It was like someone connecting all the dots, and once they were all laid out, you could see the full picture. And that picture was heartbreaking. The Lambs didn't just read JW's words and move on. For them, the letter became a turning point. It was confirmation. It gave them the clarity they needed in what had already been a painful and confusing situation. This letter gave them something they could hold on to in their fight for justice, not just for their daughter, but for every person who deserves to be protected from harm. Went to Daystar one afternoon to grab something from the cafe. There was something in the green room, and I had my child with me, and I knew she was scared at this point, so we didn't take her there anymore. We had a nanny at home with her, but this one time I wanted to pick up something really quick. I go in there, it's in the afternoon. I didn't think anyone would be in the green room, and I take her with me, and it was horrible. I go to grab that box of food, and in walks Pete and, his spouse, and my child was so full of terror, her body went completely limp, and she fell under the table hard. I grabbed her little body, I picked her up, and I ran into the car. In moments like this, when families are facing the worst kind of betrayal, it's important to remember that silence helps no one. And Jonathan choosing to speak up, sharing what happened, telling the truth, and refusing to let it be buried took real courage. What makes this even more emotional is knowing the people involved are from one of the most well-known families in Christian broadcasting. For many, this wasn't just a story. They'd grown up watching the Lambs, listening to them preach about faith, family, and integrity. So to hear about these dark accusations so close to home shook a lot of people to their core. And yet, the truth matters, even when it's messy, especially when it's painful, because protecting innocent lives and exposing wrongdoing is more important than keeping up appearances. What JW did by writing that letter, by putting everything into words, even when it was uncomfortable, was an act of bravery. And Jonathan reading it, believing it, and choosing to bring it into the light, that's the kind of leadership people need to see more of, especially in Christian spaces where accountability is often ignored for the sake of reputation. This situation has opened a lot of eyes, and while the pain is undeniable, so is the importance of standing up for what's right. As hard as it is, truth brings freedom, John 8, verse 32. And as the Bible says in Ephesians 5, verse 11, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. Now, more than ever, people are watching to see if the right thing will be done, because protecting the innocent should never be up for debate. Rebecca and I were like sisters. We're really close. And then Joni told me I was fired July 11th, and Becca JW called us, and they were telling us to come back, just read the card, do whatever it takes to come back. And at that point, we knew we had to take our stance, and we knew this is our fight. We have to do what God tells us to do. They made their choice that night. They were like, okay, we're going to do this. They made their choice, and we made ours. And from there, the relationship started to dwindle with Becca JW. It's not don't want to talk. It's a very conscious choice they've made. I would like for them to speak the justice for our little child will come from God regardless. And that is my security and my stronghold, that my child will have justice from our King. You could feel the emotion in Susie's voice when she started talking about her relationship with Rebecca. She wasn't just talking about a friend or someone she worked with. She was talking about someone who felt like family. Rebecca and I were like sisters, she said. And you could tell that wasn't just a phrase, it was real. They were close. They shared life together, laughed together, probably cried together, did ministry side by side. When someone says they were like sisters, it means there was deep trust, deep love, and years of connection that aren't easy to break. But everything changed in a moment. July 11th, that's the day Joni told Susie she was fired, just like that. No explanation, no long conversation, fired. And that wasn't just a job ending. It was the end of a chapter that had been part of her life for a long time. It hurt. And to make things even more complicated, Rebecca and JW, people she considered family, called afterward asking her and Jonathan to just come back, telling them to read some card and do whatever it took to return. Think about that for a second. Instead of asking why Susie was fired, instead of standing beside her and Jonathan, they were basically saying, just go along with it. Do whatever it takes to fix it. But Susie made it clear that wasn't an option anymore. She and Jonathan had already reached a breaking point. This wasn't just about being let go from a job. This was about what was right, what was just, and what they felt God was calling them to do. And when Susie said, we knew this was our fight, you could feel the strength in her words. She wasn't saying it to sound dramatic. She meant it. She and Jonathan weren't going to stay silent or be passive. They believed that God had given them a responsibility to stand for their daughter, for truth, and for justice, even if it meant losing relationships along the way. That moment right there was when the line was drawn. Susie said they made their choice that night, meaning Rebecca and JW chose which side they were going to stand on. And sadly, it wasn't with Susie and Jonathan. It was a hard pill to swallow. And from there, the relationship began to fade slowly, then all at once. You could tell Susie wasn't bitter. She wasn't full of rage. She was heartbroken. She said, it's not that we don't want to talk. That line is important. She's not the one shutting the door. She's saying they made that decision. It wasn't her pushing people away. It was people choosing to stay silent instead of standing for what was right. And then came the part that really hit home. Susie said something that showed just how deep her faith is, even in the middle of all this pain. She said, justice for our little child will come from God regardless. That right there is powerful. In the face of betrayal, abandonment, and deep emotional pain, she's not looking for revenge. She's not out to destroy anyone. Her confidence is in God. She knows that even if people try to cover up the truth or avoid hard conversations, God sees everything, and he will not let injustice go unanswered. She calls him her security and her stronghold. Those words aren't just pretty Bible talk. They're her reality. Psalm 9 verse 9 says, the Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. That's exactly what Susie is holding on to. Even when the people she trusted turned their backs, she knows God hasn't. This wasn't just a story about a firing or a broken friendship. This is about real life consequences when people choose silence over truth. And Susie's response is something we can all learn from. She didn't fight dirty. She didn't seek revenge. She simply stood firm. She let God be her defender. And no matter how things may look on the outside, she believes justice will come. That kind of strength doesn't come from being tough. It comes from trusting God deeply, even when everything around you feels like it's falling apart. When Susie Lamb sat down and opened up about what her family had been through, it wasn't just another emotional interview. It was raw, it was painful, and most of all, it was real. You could see it in her face, you could hear it in her voice. Every word she spoke came from a place of heartbreak, but also deep courage. This wasn't just about her own pain. This was about her child, her family, and her desperate cry for truth to finally come to the surface. Her tears weren't just for show. They were the tears of a mother who had carried a heavy burden for far too long. Susie wasn't crying for sympathy. She was crying for justice. She was for every child who has been silenced by fear, for every family who's been shattered by betrayal, and for every voice that's been ignored because the truth was too uncomfortable for some to hear. But even in that pain, Susie never lost her faith, not for a moment. Her heart was broken, yes, but her hope still strong. She believed and still believes that justice will come, that one day truth will rise above the lies and darkness, and the pain her family has endured won't be in vain. Justice will come, she said, and not just because she wants it to, but because she knows who her God is. She stands on his promise in Isaiah 61, verse 8, where God says, "For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and wrongdoing. In my faithfulness, I will reward my people." That's the God she clings to. For Susie and Jonathan, that belief has become their anchor. It's what gives them strength to keep going, even when the odds feel stacked against them, even when relationships have fallen apart, even when the public questions their motives or doubts their story. They keep going because they know truth doesn't hide, it fights back. And they're standing in that fight. But the pain they faced hasn't just been public, it's deeply personal too. Susie opened up about something that hit a lot of people right in the heart, her broken relationship with Rebecca Lamb Weiss. For those who don't know, Rebecca is Joni Lamb's daughter, but to Susie, she wasn't just a co-worker or a relative by marriage. She was like a sister. They were close, so close that their bond felt like family. They shared trust, connection, probably years of shared moments. But when the abuse was revealed, when the truth about what happened to Susie and Jonathan's daughter came to light, everything changed. That bond was shattered. Rebecca and her husband, JW, made their choice, and sadly, it wasn't to stand with the Lambs. "We've gone no contact," Susie said quietly, and you could hear the heartbreak in those words. It wasn't a decision she made lightly, but sometimes protecting your peace and standing up for what's right means walking away from people you once loved. This kind of pain doesn't just disappear, it lingers. It affects your soul. And to make things worse, both Susie and Jonathan were fired from their positions at Daystar. Susie in July 2023 and Jonathan in November 2024. Two people who had poured years of their lives into that ministry were suddenly cast aside. No explanation, no public defense, just gone. But even in that, they didn't crumble. They leaned even harder into their faith. Psalm 34, verse 18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." And Susie has held tight to that promise. "Only God can bring justice for our little child," she said. That sentence says so much. It shows that she knows human systems can fail, institutions can lie, even people close to you can turn their backs. But God, he doesn't change. He doesn't ignore truth, and he doesn't forget the cries of a child. For Susie and Jonathan, choosing to keep fighting wasn't easy. They had the option to stay quiet, to move on, to avoid rocking the boat, but they couldn't do it. "We knew this was our fight," Susie said. "We had to do what God tells us to do," and that's exactly what they did. They stood firm. They spoke out. They brought the truth into the light, even when it cost them everything. Their TV appearance was more than just another interview. It was a spark, a wake up call, a rallying cry for others who've been silent for too long. It reminded people that no matter how powerful the institution, no matter how popular the names involved, truth still matters, justice still matters, and children absolutely matter. But make no mistake, this journey hasn't been easy. Susie admitted that it's not easy, she said, but sometimes doing the right thing means making sacrifices. And they've made many, losing friends, losing jobs, losing peace, but they keep going. Why? Because their daughter deserves justice, because God is their strength, and because doing the right thing is always worth it. Galatians 6, verse 9 encourages us, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. That's the verse that comes to mind when you hear Susie's story. She hasn't given up. Neither has Jonathan. They may be tired, they may be grieving, but they're not quitting. Their story is more than just a personal battle. Now it's become a symbol of standing for truth, no matter the cost, of protecting children, no matter how uncomfortable it gets, of showing that justice and faith are not just ideas, they're powerful forces that can move mountains when people refuse to stay silent. So, what's next for Jonathan and Susie Lamb? Their journey isn't over. There are still so many unanswered questions, so much darkness that needs to be brought into the light, but they're not backing down. They believe that truth will win, that justice will prevail. And when it does, it'll be a loud and clear message. Obedience to God is never in vain, because at the end of the day, truth isn't afraid of the light, and neither are the lambs. Now, let's open it up to you. What do you think about the letter Jonathan Weiss wrote? How do you feel about what's been happening at Daystar? Are you shocked, saddened, inspired? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you.